A significant change in ownership has taken place in EverBank, a famous name in the American financial industry, during the course of the past several years. The company's present status is private, despite the fact that it was originally listed publicly on the stock exchange. An investigation into the history of EverBank's ownership, an examination of the ramifications of the bank's privatization, and an explanation of the bank's place in the financial landscape are all included in this film. From public company to private ownership. EverBank's story began in 1998 as a public company known as EverBank Financial Corporation. It traded on the New York Stock Exchange, NYSE, under the symbol EVER. This meant that anyone could invest in EverBank by purchasing shares of its stock. Public companies are subject to regulations from the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, and must disclose financial information regularly. However, in August 2023, EverBank transitioned to private ownership. TIAA, its parent company at the time, sold EverBank to a consortium of private investors. This included firms like Stone Point Capital, Warburg Pincus, and TIAA itself retaining a non-controlling stake. The reasoning behind this move wasn't publicly disclosed, but it likely reflected TIAA's strategic shift to focus on its core retirement and wealth management businesses. Public versus private, understanding the difference. The ownership structure of a company significantly impacts its operations and transparency. Here's a breakdown of the key differences between public and private companies. Ownership. Public companies have multiple shareholders who own portions of the company through stock ownership. Private companies, on the other hand, have a limited number of owners, typically investment firms or individuals. Regulation. Public companies face stricter regulations and reporting requirements. They must file financial statements with the SEC and adhere to specific accounting standards. Private companies have more flexibility in this regard. Access to capital. Public companies can raise capital by issuing new shares on the stock market. Private companies rely on their owners for funding or may raise capital through private equity or debt financing. Transparency. Public companies are obligated to be transparent about their financial performance and operations. Private companies generally have less public disclosure, although they may still have reporting requirements to their investors. Implications of EverBank's privatization. EverBank's shift to private ownership has several consequences. Reduced public scrutiny. With its private status, EverBank is no longer under the same level of public scrutiny as it was when it was publicly traded. Investors and the general public have less access to information about its financial health and operations. Strategic flexibility. As a private company, EverBank may have more freedom to pursue strategic initiatives without the pressure of short-term gains that can influence public companies. This potentially allows for a longer-term focus on growth and innovation. Access to capital. While EverBank loses the ability to raise capital through the stock market, its new ownership structure may provide access to alternative sources of funding from its private investors. EverBank's future. What to expect? Despite its private status, EverBank remains a significant player in the financial services industry. Here's what we can expect moving forward. Continued focus on core businesses. EverBank is likely to maintain its focus on consumer and commercial banking, leveraging its expertise in direct banking operations. Potential for growth. With the backing of its private investors, EverBank may pursue strategic acquisitions or expand its product offerings to drive growth. Limited public information. Obtaining detailed information about EverBank's financial performance and strategy might be more challenging due to its private ownership. EverBank's transformation from a public company to a private entity marks a significant change in its ownership structure. While this shift reduces public scrutiny, it also grants the company greater strategic flexibility. As a private entity, EverBank's future performance will depend on its ability to leverage its resources, pursue strategic opportunities, and navigate the competitive financial landscape.